Good evening and a hearty namaste to everybody. Jai Hind. Welcome to this session on technology and terrorism, decoding the future threats, conducted by Indic Researchers Forum. I am Rakisha Kolkar, your host for the session. Currently, I'm a research associate for the forum. The session chair for the session will be Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan. So, PVSM Param Vishishta Seva Medal, UISM Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, AVSM Ati Vishishta Seva Medal. Sir is a former deputy chief of the Army and a former member of the Armed Forces Tribunal, a postgraduate in defense studies and MPhil in strategic affairs and defense management. Having been a corps commander, he carries immense experience, operational as well as management of a large pool of human and material resources. As the deputy chief of the Army, he was responsible for the perspective planning, financial planning, and capital acquisition of the Indian Army. He is widely traveled and has been part of numerous delegations representing the country. He has been on the board of directors of Bharat Electronics Limited and Bharat Dynamics Limited, two of India's leading defense PSUs. He also provides consultancy to various defense industries. Sir is also a regular speaker on strategic affairs and national security, and is also a prolific writer on a wide variety of subjects of energy, geopolitics, and geoeconomics. We are extremely delighted to have you, sir. For the session, we are delighted to have Colonel Dr. Ram Athavale, sir, as our first key speaker, who will be speaking on decoding Cbrn, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear terrorism. Colonel Athavale, sir, is a specialist in Cbrn security, risk mitigation, incident management, and holds a PhD for his doctoral research in Cbrn Counter-Terrorism. An 81 batch veteran officer, he was last posted as Director Cbrn at the Army headquarters, and he has been a key Cbrn advisor to the Government of India and the European Union Cbrn Risk Mitigation Centers of Excellence initiative. Colonel is further a prolific writer in Cbrn journals and defense and security magazines. Colonel Athavale has also authored a pioneering book, Cbrn Incident Management India, titled Toxic Potents. Today, he functions as a Cbrn security consultant and a visiting adjunct faculty at some Indian and overseas universities, academic institutions, and military establishments. Following Colonel Athavale, sir, we will be having the second key speaker, who will be Brigadier General Rami Efrati, sir, who will be speaking on decoding the threat of cyber terrorism. Brigadier General Efrati has served in the Israeli Defense Forces for more than 28 years. He has commanded numerous prestigious operational and technological positions in military intelligence and received the Creative Thinking Award from the Director of Military Intelligence, Israel. Mr. Efrati is an expert in cyber strategic methods and has many years of experience in anti-terrorism and intelligence technology. Mr. Efrati is one of the founding members and former head of civilian division of the Israel National Cyber Bureau in the Prime Minister's office. In this capacity, he raised Israel to a leading position in the civilian aspect of global cybersecurity and brought multinational companies to open cyber research and development centers in Israel. Currently, he is involved in international level strategic projects for cybersecurity and innovation. The third key speaker we will be having for this session will be Dr. Jasim Haji, who will be speaking on decoding the role and significance of AI in terrorism and counter-terrorism. Dr. Haji is an international expert, strategist, and researcher in AI and digital transformation. Plus, he is also the president of Artificial Intelligence Group. He has participated as a key speaker and chairman in over 300 technology conferences in the Middle East and Europe to cover latest technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, cybersecurity, and digital transformations. He has also published articles in relation to the above topics. Furthermore, he also features on the cover page of 19 international technology and aviation magazines with over 180 interviews. Moreover, he has published 5 books in English and Arabic on AI, algorithm, digital transformation post-COVID-19. Technology management. On the topics of technology management, organizational culture, he has published over 720 articles on the same in international press in both English and Arabic language. The last key speaker we will be having for the session is Pavel Bernard, sir, who will be speaking on the threat of space terrorism. Sir has done his PhD and is a senior lecturer on international security studies at the Faculty of Aviation Safety in the Polish Air Force University, Dublin, in Poland. His area of expertise includes strategic aspects of outer space, with a special focus on militarization and weaponization of Earth's orbit, space terrorism, and proxy and hybrid warfare. He's the co-founder and the vice president of Andata Education for Security Andata Education Foundation for Security Education, deputy director-in-chief of the Safety Defense Academic Journal, and a member of Polish Space Professionals Association. Over to the session chair, Lieutenant General C.A. Krishnan, sir.
Thank you very much, and good evening to every one of you who's on the list, on listening now from me and on behalf of all the panelists. And greetings to the panelists, depending on the time of the day that's in your region. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This session is on technology and terrorism. You know, without doubt, one can say that it's a very dynamic topic which will remain evergreen and relevant in the years to come. I must say it's a privilege to chair this session comprising of such distinguished panelists, and I thank the Indic Researchers Forum for giving this opportunity to me. As Argesh has already explained, we have Colonel Dr. Ram Athavale, Brigadier General Rami Erfati. We hope Dr. Jassim Haji will join us soon, and also Dr. Bernard in the panel with us. As the chair of the session, I will try not to trespass as much as possible onto the specific dimensions that our panelists would be covering, but I will set the context with a broad overview and also flag some important issues on which each of these specific dimensions, ladies and gentlemen. We are living in an era where tech transformation is taking place at lightning speed. Simultaneously, along with this, we are also witnessing democratization of new and emerging technologies. And technology in today's world is continuously triggering transformational capability jumps. You know, if I can just take a case in point, the 4G RAM mobile phone, which most of the people use today, has 1 million times more RAM memory than the 1969 Apollo mission computers. Also, if we compare the read-only memory, the RAM, the ROM, what we call it, you know, the normal the 4G phone of today has 7 million times more memory than what the Apollo guidance computer has. Now, that just indicative of the transformational capability jumps that the technology is providing us. Such huge continuous technology jumps will be the norm as we progress in time. In fact, it's a coincidence that we are just a few days away from the 5G rollout in India. That is set to trigger another big technology jump, at least in this part of the world. Technology is a driver of development and prosperity, but in the wrong hands, you will all agree that it can be unimaginably dangerous and destructive. Technology in today's age of open innovation, people have great freedom to invent, buy off the shelf, use, distribute, and repurpose almost everything. Terrorists look for, you're all aware that terrorists look for means that are useful in a wide range of contexts. They choose actions which are symbolically resonant, actions that would magnify and sensationalize effects of their strikes, actions that would magnify the perception of their power. And technology happens to be a big enabler in all these. Easy access to technologies, even cutting edge technologies, and the reach that it provides into every layer of the society today is remarkable. And more importantly, it cuts across borders and oceans, and shall I say, it even pervades into even space with impunity. Technology also opens up an entire set of new terrorist activities or activities which can be put to use by terrorists, which can be executed with anonymity and a great degree of deniability. Now, what happens because of this new dimension being added is that it facilitates countries to use state-sponsored terrorism as an effective weapon of proxy war, even in during normal times. With that backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, let me spend just a couple of minutes each on the various dimensions which our expert panelists would be covering in detail. Coming to the Syrian terrorism first, CBRN material falling into the hands of terrorists is as much a threat as its actual use, because even a threat of its use can cause very severe turbulence. CBRN can be used against individuals, it can be used to target groups and gatherings, and even against entire population in a geographical area. Effective defense against CBRN threat may lie in international cooperation. NATO's Dexter may be a model to follow. Effective worldwide vigil and better ability to detect CBRN material. Talking of cyber terrorism, the cyber world of today is all-encompassing and enables people to remain dispersed across the globe and yet remain interconnected as never before. Funds can be dispersed and received from any corner of the world by anyone. Online radicalization and recruitment are effective options today. Never in the history, ladies and gentlemen, have non-state actors and terrorists been so tech-savvy, resourceful, dynamic, well-funded, and globally connected. Everything in today's world, almost every activity, whether it is personal, social, corporate, financial, health, administrative, scientific, military, research, the list is really endless. All these have witnessed total digitization. Now, this process, while making life easy for us, has also made us extremely vulnerable to cyber attacks, whether as individuals, as collective entities, or even as nations. This vulnerability, combined with democratization and easy access to technology, gives individuals and groups unimaginable power. Today, given the required material inputs, one may actually be in a position to assemble a nuclear weapon. We may be able to 3D print a drone and integrate it with the navigation system of our mobile phone. Similarly, an autonomous vehicle can be repurposed to carry out a deadly strike. Now, coming to artificial intelligence, AI finds increasing application across the board today. While on the one hand, in tandem with digitization and cyber, it is making life easy for us. On the other, it is arming itself with more and more and all sorts of information, data, and capabilities. AI-enabled cyber attacks and disinformation are very potent non-kinetic weapons today. It enables soft killing of individuals, communities, corporate entities, and even nations. AI's phenomenal growth and monopoly could pose huge threats, ladies and gentlemen. Metaverse with virtual and augmented reality enables 3D multisensory experience today. It can actually give a virtual familiarization tour of a target area to a terrorist. It can resurrect a character like Bin Laden or even Al-Zawahiri and organize a pep talk from them to radicalize potential terrorists. Imagine the potential of such capability, especially in the fact that even without all this, with just simple internet connectivity a few years back, we had some fundamentalist youth from Kerala who had gone all the way to Afghanistan and were fighting for ISIS. But there is one silver lining, and that is while any technology can be exploited by terrorists as well as for those who are fighting terrorism, by its very nature, AI probably gives greater advantages to those countering terrorism. than to terrorists. Consider the boost that it gives to surveillance capability for things like monitoring, detecting, and identifying potential terrorists and suspected terror activities. Coming to space terrorism, it is comparatively a new phenomenon. We are fortunate today to have with us Dr. Bernard, who writes and speaks extensively on the subject. In fact, there aren't many people in the world who write on this as on today. A terrorist strike aimed at any space program activity would actually tick many boxes from the point of view of a terrorist. You know, it has symbolic significance, it creates sensation, magnifies their power, and also projects the concerned government as helpless. Space terrorism, the way one looks at it, it may target ground facilities and assets, important personnel involved in the program, critical cyber links, and even satellites and space ships. In this context, something of concern happened near a home in 2018. 4 sandwich size, just sandwich size nano satellites. Okay, I think there was some interruption. I was talking about the 4 sandwich-sized nano-satellites of a US startup called Swarm Technologies, which were amongst the 31 satellites which were launched by Indian Space Research Organization in early 2018. Although Swarm Technologies' intention may not have been devilish, it turned out that they were not authorized by their own country's regulatory authority to launch these 4 nano satellites. Now, the reason quoted for not giving them permission was that these nano satellites, at that point in time, at least in early 2018, were far too small to be tracked by the NASA. Now, what is important in this for us, in the context that we are discussing today, is that the incidents actually gives us a glimpse of the increasing extent of private participation in space activity and the increasing possibilities of space terrorism. Incidentally, it may be of interest to know that Swarm Technology was acquired by Elon Musk's SpaceX last year. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, let me hand over to the panelists. And to open the session, we will first have Cbn terrorism. And may I request Colonel Dr. Atawale to take over. Over to you, Colonel Atawale.
Thank you very much, sir. I welcome you all to this session with the Indic Researchers Forum. Respected chair has already laid out the format of how we are going to go ahead and the different aspects of technology. What I'm going to talk to you is about Cbn terrorism and the efforts being made, not just internationally, but also by India in trying to prevent and, if it happens, respond to such kind of incidents. So I would like to share my screen. If it is okay, I will go ahead now. And a click more. Yeah. So these were the 4 symbols that I was talking about. I mentioned to you about the familiarity with the biological, radiological symbols, even the nuclear one at some places. But the chemical one is something which needs to be understood. These are internationally accepted and recognized symbols. These all represent hazards. Like I mentioned, I saw this bio symbol painted all over a bus in different hues and colors as a decorative means in Kenya, which is not the way to depict it because it represents a hazard and we need to be careful how we use these symbols. Next one. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I was talking about the Cbn threat matrix, the natural one where we have the environmental toxicity or the disease outbreaks, and the man-made ones. In the man-made, we have the accidental ones where we have industrial accidents like we had in Bhopal in 1984. We have seen the toxic trains getting derailed in the US. We've seen the Tianjin port explosions where a lot of toxic chemicals got exploded, even the Beirut blast which happened. So there have been a number of such industrial accidents which have taken place. And then we have the environmental pollutants. Those of my friends who are in Delhi would understand what I'm talking about, the smog and the fog combined, which makes life miserable. We also have the logistic accidents. Imagine a tanker carrying toxic chemical from one place to another, which gets overturned or meets with an accident or something, and you have a huge amount of toxic spill taking place. Then we have laboratory and research accidents. A whole lot of laboratories in the world are researching on highly toxic, highly lethal pathogens and chemicals and even radioactive substances. Now, a release from these laboratories or an accident in these laboratories could also be devastating. And then we have the last, which is wastes and effluents. Tons and tons of waste is being produced by practically every city and town in the world. And we just hope that it is disposed of correctly without affecting people who are staying in the vicinity of those areas. Lastly, I come to the deliberate part of it. Criminal poisoning or disease spread. Here I'm talking of individual cases, throwing acid on people's faces, using or poisoning water bodies. There were instances where the water in girls' schools in Afghanistan used to be poisoned, basically to discourage the girls from attending schools. Now, that is what I'm talking about, criminal poisoning. Then, of course, there's state use or sponsored Cbrn attacks. A lot of it has been happening in Syria recently. Before that, we had the Iraqi use of mustard against the Kurdish rebels. Of course, in World War I, there was massive use of Cbrn material, especially chemicals, by the Germans, and of course, the biological and chemical means by the Japanese in World War I and World War II also. But the last is Cbrn terrorism, and that is what we are going to be talking about. How is it connected to all this? The material for Cbrn terrorism, where does it come from? It is going to come from what has been mentioned in the bluish gray blobs under the accidental. It is going to come from industry. It is going to come from trade. It is going to come from research laboratories. It is going to come from pollutants, from wastes. And that is where the material is going to be sourced by the terror organizations. And therefore, we need to be very careful and protect these aspects to deny the access to the terrorists. Next, please. This is the military level of chemical agents or chemical weapons that we are talking of, whether we call them blister agents, choking agents, blood agents, and nerve agents. I have mentioned some examples of these chemicals. But the point is, today, with the widespread industry growing, globalization taking place, industry is using millions of types of chemicals. And it is very difficult to really control chemicals in today's world. Most of the chemicals are legally used in industries. They may be highly toxic chemicals, but they are industrial use chemicals. And they can always be put to a dual use of using them as weaponized means to cause casualties. And therefore, chemicals are also called the poor man's atom bomb. Can we have the next slide? I've made a list here of toxic industrial chemicals, or TICs, as it is commonly called in the Cbrn parlance. I have highlighted some of them in red. These are the ones which have been causing casualties across the world. Chlorine, for example, is a high hazard industrial chemical widely used in industries. But this is the same chemical which caused hundreds and thousands of casualties in World War I when they were used against the Allied forces by the Germans. Methyl isocyanate, I have highlighted in the medium hazard, is the chemical which caused thousands of deaths when the Bhopal tragedy took place in 1984. So what I'm trying to highlight is we have chemicals in our midst. At home, we have pesticides, we have cleaners, we have insecticides of all kinds. They're all toxic chemicals and they are meant to kill. We use them to kill insects and pests. Don't ingest them yourself, don't drink it yourself, you'll also die. That is the kind of threat that we have in our midst, where it can easily be converted from a one use, a peaceful use, to a weaponized dual use. Next, please. Coming to biological agents are everywhere around us. Toxic agents like bacteria, rickettsia, virus, fungi, it's everywhere. It is only when you weaponize these agents that it becomes biological warfare. We have seen a number of diseases coming up. We have seen Ebola, Marburg disease. We have seen swine flu. We have seen the SARS 1 and 2. We have seen the COVID-19 over the last 2 years now and still continuing. But what is interesting out of biological agents is, can we have the next? Click, please. Toxins. Toxins are animal and plant poisons which are extracted and used in a malified manner. These are the poisons which are dangerous. Why these are dangerous? Because toxins can actually be used without the fear of transferring contagion. And therefore, toxins are considered to be a preferred means of biological agents by terrorists. Now, modifying all this, next click please, is what genetic engineering is all about. Increasing the pathogenicity, changing antigenic structure of these bioagents, changing the markers for diagnosis so that you cannot diagnose a particular disease or a particular agent in the victims. And many such type of new technologies which are coming in, which will create a biological agent which has not been used earlier and which is difficult to detect. Next. Coming to radiological weapons. What I want to highlight here is radiological weapons are different from nuclear weapons. Radiological weapons use only the radioactivity of naturally occurring radioactive substances. Whereas in the nuclear weapons, we are using the blast and the fire effect, the temperature effect, the heat effect also to good use, or rather bad use. Radiological weapons are called dirty bombs, or the technological term is radiological dispersal devices. I'll explain it in a very simpler manner. You take a naturally occurring radioactive substance in a powdered form, pack it in between a conventional explosive, detonate the explosive, there will be a huge amount of blast, and that powder inside, the radioactive powder, will get dispersed everywhere, landing on trees, on people, on buildings, on vehicles, on equipment, on everything, even water bodies. And it will create the effect what happened in Chernobyl or Fukushima, the kind of radioactivity which got spread. That is the kind of effect which a radiological weapon can create. There are different types of radioactive substances, naturally occurring radioactive substances, which are used in industrial devices, in medical devices. All your CAT scan, PET scan, all these devices are using radioactive substances, which can be used in a malified manner. Next, please. Coming last to the nuclear weapons, the N of the CBRN, we have seen the first two uses of nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just this month was the anniversary on 6th and 9th of August of these two deadly weapons which were used. Thankfully, they have not been used since then, and I hope to God that they are never used in future also. But the disturbing part is that there is a lot of thought, there's a lot of material, there's a lot of knowledge which is available on the internet, in books about IND, improvised nuclear devices. What are IND? IND are illicit nuclear weapons, either bought directly, stolen, or obtained. I mentioned obtained because it could be any clandestine kind of a deal which is going on, from a nuclear state, or a weapon fabricated by a terrorist group, a crude weapon fabricated by a terrorist group from illegally obtained fissile material. There are numerous reports of a black market in fissile material in the Central Asian region. I'll flash to you a slide where a huge amount of nuclear material nuclear fissile material was seen being stolen and captured by police authorities in different places. Now, that is the kind of threat that is there from the IND. This slide is just flashing some CBRN incidents, and I'm using the term incidents because these are not terrorist-related incidents. These are industrial incidents, toxic waste incidents. And what you see, one of them is the Beirut blast, which happened in 2020. Nearly half the city was affected by the blasts. We have the Tianjin port blast, which happened in China. Thankfully, it did not lead to a cyanide release. There was a huge warehouse which had sodium cyanide, and had the firefighters poured water over that fire, it would have released a huge amount of hydrogen cyanide. It didn't happen. Of course, there was a styrene gas leak in India, in Vizag in May 2020 again, which caused 14 deaths and led to a whole lot of people getting hospitalized. Next, please. Coming to CBRN terrorism. Yeah. Next. The first thing I want to say is it is real. It is happening. It has happened in the past. Next, please. What are the motivations and how is it going to manifest? I've listed out some motivations. Ma'am spoke about the psychology of terrorists in the last session. Some of these things would be similar to what I've mentioned under motivations. But I'm coming to capability enhancement. Today's terrorist is organizationally organized. He's got a structure in place. He has got support with him. He's technologically advanced. I'll show you some instances where trained people have been using CBRN methods. Financially, they are quite strong, and they are harnessing the skills of trained people. And that is what capability enhancement is all about. So it is not the run-of-the-mill cannon fodder, illiterate person without a job who's now the terrorist of today. It is a very advanced terrorist of today, and we need to be keeping that in mind when we are dealing how to counter that. The other points are how an attack would take place. I mean, this is how other terrorist attacks would also take place, so I will not go too much into detail of that. Next, please. Next. Like I mentioned, yeah, next, please. To stop CBRN terrorism, we need to address the source of the material. These are some toxic terror instances which have happened. Starting from the right bottom, the Tokyo train attacks, which happened in 1995 when sarin gas was released. We have had some lone wolf kind of terrorist attacks with CBRN, Kim Jong-nam in 2017, and we had the Novichok nerve agent attacks in the UK in March and July 2018. I will talk a little bit more about the left top corner in the next slide and explain what happened there, because I was in Kenya at that time. Next, please. This slide lists out what the ISIs, how they have been using chlorine and sulfur mustard, not once, not twice, but regularly. There is a study which has also said that almost 52 times ISIS has used chemical as weapon in various places. Next, please. This is the story which I wanted to talk to you about. This is what happened in Kenya. The Kenyan intelligence and the Kenyan police, with help from Interpol, raided a county hospital in a very small port town of Kenya. And they caught two people, especially this fellow Ali, who and his friend were both sitting, as they are trained doctors, mind you, and they were sitting in the path lab of a hospital trying to extract anthrax from animal carcasses, stabilizing the spores for transportation to Europe as a terror weapon. It was such a nondescript kind of a place. It was quietly happening at that place. When they interrogated them, they found that it was a complete network. Ali's wife was working in Uganda on a similar mission, and there were some reports of people even having been caught in Ethiopia doing the same thing. They were all members of the Al-Shabaab terror organization aligned to ISIS. That is what capability which I was talking about. That is what organization which I was talking about. That is what the skills and technology harnessing which I was talking about. Next, please. These are the emerging technology. And let me highlight a couple of things. There was This
Sorry, Athavale, how long would you take?
just another 3-4 minutes, sir.
All right. Okay.
Yes, sir. Triton 2017 is one of the viruses which was developed, which affected industries and closed down certain processes in the industries. Collaboration Pharmaceuticals was presenting how to isolate toxic substances from pharmaceuticals in the Spies laboratory in Switzerland, and to their horror, one of their processes got reversed, and the same artificial intelligence generated 4,000 toxic agents on its own, new chemicals, which were actually very close to nerve agents. I've talked about improvised nuclear devices and RDT. Next, please. Yeah, next. International conventions, treaties, and initiatives. Yeah, next. We have under the UN a whole lot of treaties and conventions. We have the Chemical Weapons Convention, the Biological Weapons Convention, the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But what I want to highlight here is the UNICRI's Cbrn Risk Mitigation Program, which is working in conjunction with Interpol and the EU Cbrn Action Plan. This was the project which I was working for 3 years in Kenya, looking after Eastern and Central Africa. They are doing a fantastic job of training, helping make policies and legislations and things like that in various countries, enhancing their capability to combat Cbrn threats. Next, please. A quick look on the Indian paradigm. Yeah. Next. Keep clicking. First, we need a national strategy which is aligned with the national security strategy. Threat assessment, key Cbrn objectives, and governance structure. We have a nodal system in India where we have ministries which are nodal agencies for different Cbrn types of threats: biological, chemical, and radiological and nuclear. Then is development of a Cbrn action plan. Domestic laws and regulations which are generated in any country, this is common to anybody, need to be aligned with the international protocols and conventions that that country has signed. A Cbrn incident management structure is necessary in the country to be able to manage threat perception, threat prevention, crisis management, and consequence management. Next, please. These are the nodal ministries and the agencies in India. I will not go too much into detail of that. Next, please. This is a quick look at the stakeholders. Apart from the major ones which are mentioned in the blue blobs, I have listed out on the right-hand side all the ministries and agencies which are responsible for Cbrn. Next. Not just this, it is industries, logistics, private R&D, and citizens, you and me. Every one of us is responsible stakeholder in the Cbrn battle. Next. These are the list of laws. I have a list. Those of you who are interested can contact me. I have a complete list of more than 100 laws that have been generated in India for Cbrn related issues. These are key laboratories in India. We are quite aware of those. Next. Certain Cbrn specific initiatives which have been taken. We have first responders deployed. We have developed SOPs down to district level for Cbrn, countering Cbrn terrorism, mobile radiation detection centers and labs which have been established, and a disease surveillance program across the country is working. Next. Yeah, just click and open the whole thing. This is what needs to be done. Yeah, this is my last slide. This is my last slide. This is what needs to be done in any country for a robust Cbrn, a counter Cbrn system to be there. Awareness enhancement, that's the first thing which we need to do. All stakeholders, I showed you a whole list of stakeholders. I mentioned about the Cbrn strategy and plan. Cbrn intelligence. Cbrn, COVID-19 started sometime in September, October 2019. The world came to know about it in January. The WHO declared it as a world calamity in end of January. We declared it in India in March 2020. Still we were unprepared. And it's not us. Most of the world was unprepared to handle COVID-19. Why? Did we not have systems in place? Did we not have intelligence about such kind of thing. And that is where CBRN intelligence comes in. And that leads to prevention, enforcement, and oversight. Not allow an incident to happen. If it happens, then of course the first response capability needs to be developed. I'll come to the need to develop a CBRN security culture. Stakeholders, common citizens, government agencies, we need to teach this subject in colleges and high schools. We need to teach medical students on how to handle CBRN casualties. And therefore, we need a national CBRN center of excellence where all these things can be handled. I have finished here. I'll just flash the next slide, which is the picture of my book. Those of you who are interested may please get it on Amazon. You can ask me details about that. I have finished and I'm open to questions now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take the questions in the end because of any time problem and also because we are not too sure about Dr. Jasim Haji. Okay. Thank you very much, Colonel Dr. Atavle. As always, you more than done justice to your outstanding reputation. You've given us everything that can be covered. I think I wonder how you covered it in this 20-25 minutes. Thank you very much. We now go over to another expert who, apart from the research, he would have so much of first-hand experience. So I would not try to preempt anything. Over to you, Brigadier General Rami. All yours.
Thank you very much. Shalom and good afternoon to all of you. I would like first of all to thank the Indic Research Forum for inviting me to speak today. It is my great honor. I have a very special attitude to India, and I can tell you that since I was young, I had only a very special dream, which was to visit the Taj Mahal, which I did it. So I'm very proud and happy about it. I would like also to dedicate my presentation to a very dear Indian friend who unfortunately passed away during COVID-19. His name was Mr. Nitin Goel, and we have been working together for a very long time. And for me, he is the gentleman who represents India. Honest, professional, knows what he's saying. And I'm very proud that his wife, his daughter, and his son are here with us today. Also, I thank General Wesley from Singapore and all my friends from Singapore and all over the world to be here with us. And since I mentioned COVID, I would like to say something about COVID. And Dr. Atavale, thank you very much. Although it was very long, I don't have now what to say, but I would like to say something. I don't know, hypothesis, whether COVID-19 was a terror activity or not. But during COVID-19, we were ready to reduce our privacy almost to zero, and we were thinking of doing everything in order to make sure that this disease will disappear. I start with this because for me, terror is terror. I don't care whether this terror is coming by a kinetic attack, whether it is coming via cyber attack, whether it is a biological attack or anything else. We need to fight terrorism. I'm saying it because during the last 2 days, I was listening to most of the speeches, which were amazing. And one of the things that I noticed is there is a difference between the young generation and the old generation. Since some of the people here are my generation, I would say, I can tell you that only people who unfortunately face terror by themselves and know the results of any kind of terrorism, only we understand that whenever it comes to terrorism, we have to fight it strongly. Let me say something that maybe many people will not agree with me. If there is a terrorist in Tel Aviv, I'm ready to do anything that he will be stopped immediately, even if my privacy will no more exist, and knowing that the intelligence organization and all others will fight this terrorism. I start with this because, as I told you, terrorism is terrorism. So I don't care whether terrorism is coming from a cyber attack or from a kinetic attack. The result is the same. And what I'm going to speak now with you is mainly about things that we have done, technologies that we have developed all over the world, but of course, many of them are coming from Israel, and what I believe we should do. And I will come later to 3 or 4 ideas that we need to do as quickly as possible in order to make our world much more secured and much more promising for our children and for our grandchildren and families. Mr. General Krishnan said about the computer. Yes, the computer that we have today in our iPhone or any other mobile phone, is much stronger than the one who took the guys to moon, but even were able to get them back. Meaning we are holding in our hands a weapon system that is so strong that can make a lot of manipulation, that can deceive others, and can do many things, and we have to take it carefully. But this is the world. Technology is ruling. We are living in a new dimension. Everything is terabytes of information. We have to make sure that we will be ready for this. Internet took a very important part. In many countries, they are now saying, let's have our own internet, like Baidu, like others. I'm not sure, but there are trends all over the world. Should we go to the cloud? Shouldn't we go to the cloud? All these technologies are existing. And the way that they serve us as the regular citizens also serves the attackers, the hackers, the adversaries who would like to do things against us. And so the new technology opened new dimensions, both in the civilian sector as well as in the military sector as well. And therefore, a lot of technologies that we are using today, not anymore coming only from an R&D in the military, but they are used as civilian technology that can be used also by other organizations. And therefore, while we are speaking about technology, and my main speak today is about decoding the cyber or the cyber terrorism, I'm going to speak more about the technologies that we are facing every day. If I will have the time, I'm not sure. And not as usual with me, I also prepare the kind of presentation, but I hope I will not be need to use it as well. A world without borders, digital borders, a world where everybody can get access to any kind of information is the world that we are living today. So when I look at the people at Kashmir, when I look at the people in Gaza Strip, when I look at the Hezbollah or at the Iranian, I know one thing. They're able and they have the access and the knowledge how to attack us. The biggest change that was done during the last 10 years is that if in the past, in order to be dominant in the world, you need to be strong, you need to be a continent like United States, Russia, India, China, today, in order to attack or make a cyber attack, you're able to buy these tools in the market, not in the regular market. We call it the darknet, the dark web. But this is existing. And most of the sophisticated cyber attacks solution can be bought today or got even for free, because people like Snowden and others were able to leak this information directly from the most sensitive areas in the intelligence organization. And suddenly also those who are the hackers or the bad guys, and even non-state organizations like terrorist organizations, are able to use amazing technology in order to attack us. What do we have to do? In a minute, I will speak about it. We have to be ready. I don't know how many of you have been to Israel before, but let me tell you one thing. We are not living in a friendly environment. That is the main message. And if you are not living in a friendly environment, you have to be ready for everything. And if you have to be ready for any kind of attack, you have to take it very, very seriously. And we took it seriously. That's how we came also with special solutions like Iron Dome and cybersecurity and others, which became a big issue also in our export life, because we understood nobody else is going to support us. And we are facing terrorism for many years. Yesterday, Dr. Fleischer spoke about it, and so I'm not going to repeat, but we face terrorism for a very long time, and unfortunately, I believe that we will face it for another many years. And that's why we have to be ready. While there is no borders, while everybody is having the tools, while everybody is trying to attack, there should be a chaos. Can we stop this chaos? The answer is sure, yes. And what kind of chaos do we see? We see this kind of attacks. It can be destruction. It can be disinformation. It can be denial, DDoS, denial of service. It can be defacement. All these things are only some of the areas that we are facing every day while somebody wants to make a terrorism activities. Because what is terrorism? Terrorism is the way to change the public's opinions about things. That's why we suddenly found that countries are trying to affect elections in many places. We are going to face, now in Israel, about every half a year we have new elections, unfortunately, and we know for sure that people, either internally or outside the country, will try to affect it. I call it a terrorism, because this is a way to try and change our decisions about who are we going to vote for. So just to remember, when we are speaking about cyber terrorism, we are not speaking anymore only about cyber or about cyber attacks on information systems. We are speaking about critical infrastructures. We're speaking about our lives. And Dr. Atavale, when he gave the idea also about accidents that can happen, for me, I have to be ready for this kind of accident, even if it is not a cyber attack, and to mitigate it as quickly as possible and come back to business immediately. What happened and why did many countries were not, unfortunately, prepared for the kind of cyber attacks? Because they didn't take it seriously. And the slow preparedness for any kinds of terrorism attacks was something which was out of their mind. Unfortunately, I'm still hearing the word on cyber, of course, it will never happen to us. But I can tell you that it happens to us and it will happen to us, and we have to be well prepared. If we are slow and if we are not going to take it seriously, this is the time that the hackers, the adversaries, the bad guys will try to get in. And in order to get in, they don't need to attack you today. They can just get into their system, into the critical systems, using advanced persistent threats, APTs, which is Trojan horses, waiting for the decision. The decision can be a political decision. We would like to give Indian government, just a sample, a message. If you are going to do that, we are going to do this. It happened in Ukraine. It happened in some other countries now in Europe. And either government or terrorists or those who are playing as if they are terrorists, but they are under the governments, this is what they are going to do. The important word when we are speaking about cyber is attribution. When the Hamas or the Hezbollah is launching a missile on Israel, It usually takes, I won't say exactly the time, the Israeli intelligence and Air Force several milliseconds or seconds to identify where exactly this missile was launched and to attack it back. When it comes to cyber, this is totally another story. Attribution is the word. Nobody usually who is attacking you is coming with a message in the news. They like to stay in the shade. And this is something that I'm going to speak in a minute, is what have you done and what are you going to do in order to make sure that you will be prepared for this minute and how you are going to do it. So, just to give you an example why it is so important to identify a cyber attack like a kinetic attack, during 2014, when we had this operation in Gaza Street called Protective Edge, for the first time ever, the Israeli Defense Forces decided to retaliate and to attack back those terrorists / cyber hackers who were trying to attack Israel via cyber, not anymore only by missiles. It was a message. We knew exactly where they were sitting, where they were living, where was their offices. We attacked them. We didn't want to kill them. We wanted to send a message. Cyber attack, cyber terrorism is exactly a weapon, and we are going to fight this weapon. Also, the American came with the APT-24, and they published the names of the Chinese who were behind it, etc. This is what we have to do. So just in order to make it much more practical here, I believe that we can fight cyber from any kind, but mainly on cyber terrorism in every way, but mainly cyber terrorism in 4 ways. The most important one, and that's why I'm here today together with you, my friends from India and other places, is that we need to have an international cooperation, and we need to share information, including intelligence information, about any kind of cyber terrorism, as well as we should do when we are dealing with terrorism by itself. But this is not enough. When we are speaking about cyber, the civilian sector takes a very important role. And in the civilian sector, we should find the intelligence ready, because you don't need to have SIGINT and UMINT and OSINT and other. It is here. It is posted. It is in LinkedIn. It is on Facebook. It is on TikTok. It is on Telegram. I don't think I will have the time to show you a kind of work on this, but it is here. Meaning the information is here. And the guy who was attacked in his supermarket or in his electric company, he should immediately have the trust to update his colleagues and say, in a special way, of course, I'm attacked, let's see what's going on. So cooperation in every level. When I was the head of the civilian sector, the first thing I was trying to do was to create trust. How can we trust each other that if you will send me your information, I will not going to publish it? Of course, legally, I had to go also to the antitrust authority, which I did, and they understood. You need to do it. You fight terror by sharing the information. Since I don't have so much time, I'm going to the next one. The second one, and I think Dr. Atavale spoke about it as well, is regulations and laws. I won't call it cyber law. I will call it anti-terrorism laws, which we have it in Israel. Many other countries are having it. Many countries are now writing it, etc., including international laws. The third one is, and this is maybe the main issue that I like to deal with, is new advanced technology. The technology is existing. During COVID-19, we wanted to know in a resolution that less of 1 meter, if a guy was affected by COVID-19, where he is. This can be used for other things as well. Is it a special secured military solution? No. It is existing. Even Google can give you a Google, what we call Google promotions, Google AD advertisement can give you this resolution. So if we were ready to do it when we had COVID-19, we should do it also when we are dealing with anti-terrorism. In a minute, I will come more about it. And intelligence. We have to find the right way to share the intelligence. Because, for instance, if an electric company identifies somebody is trying to hack or to test the ports of the system and trying to get in, and he is going to give it to the national CERT, Computer Emergency Response Team, which I'm not going to elaborate now about it, but it takes a very important role. This CERT will immediately update and disseminate the relevant information. Take out now, privacy should be considered, to all other relevant organizations, the police, because they can work by the law to stop you. If you have a national organization dealing with cyber, like we have one in Israel, the Israel National Cyber Directorate, they should disseminate this information to the military. They should send this information to CAPSEC. They should send this information to every intelligence organization. Each one will come as a part of the puzzle, because based on attribution, usually if I'm attacked in my company, I will never be able to know who really attacked me. But take a piece of information from the SI, the SIGINT, take one from the UMIN, take from others, your chances are much better to know who is behind it. And if you have an international cooperation, maybe this information or the attack started in Pakistan. Maybe it started some other places. Let's find it, and let's find it together. I can send you a message, although I'm speaking only on behalf of my name. Israel is ready to share the information about cyber because it's a civilian issue. And of course, if you have a very, 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 very sensitive information coming from a very sensitive source, you should not maybe disseminate this information, or maybe you give it only to the one who is in charge in order to do it. So intelligence is taking a very important role. What should we do? How long do I have? Because I can usually speak for 10 hours, but I want to be on time.
Brigadier General, another 3-4 minutes?
Excellent, no problem. 3-4 minutes, we can make a revolution.
Okay.
So,
yeah, we want you to do that.
So what can we do? What can we do in order to decode the cyber attacks? Most important part, and in India you can be very proud about it, is the human capital. Train as many people. You have smart people, they are working all over the world, even in Israel. Train your people on cyber. If you will train them on cyber security, they are going to be the main force, the main strength of the country to deal with cyber attacks. You can do it. Second one is resilience. Make sure that you're able to get back to work as quickly as possible. Business continuity. Awareness. I'm now doing it, sir, only in highlights. Awareness. Cyber is the culture. You need to have your awareness. People have to know what is cyber. Even if they don't understand it, they should consider it before they push the button. Academia. Academias should go on and teach. In Israel, we are teaching for the last 12 years, cyber as a master degree, now also for PhD, I believe. Train people. There, by the way, you will find that these people will stay in India, and this is going to be their future, and this is the future of the country. And the next one is, of course, new technology. You cannot deal today without an artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning, and many other beautiful acronyms that this is a part of our life. So can we do it? The answer is yes. And since the General gave me only 2-3 more minutes, then I'm going to have to finalize my speech. I can say more, but let me just finalize by saying cyber security is an area for cooperation, for worldwide cooperation. Israel is doing it. Israel is ready to do it. India is a great partner. I really recommend to do it as quickly as possible. I will be more than happy to come to India and give you many other ideas, including on new technologies which are really existing. And at the end, you need to have a strategy. If you have a strategy, you can build a roadmap. If you have a roadmap, you have a plan. Cyber plan is not 2 years, not 3 years, but you have to build it one by one. I thank you very much. Thank you again for inviting me, and shukriya.
Thank you, Brigadier General Rami. Thanks a lot for coming over and making yourself available and giving this excellent talk on the cyber terrorism, covering cyber terrorism. And I think what really added value to whatever you said, highlighting all important issues, you just flagged them. We understand it is because of the time constraint, but what immensely added value to whatever you said are your, what came out from your personal experience, the first-hand experience. Thank you very much. Anything else, in case time permits, we'll take on during the question hour. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very happy to inform you that Dr. Jassim has joined us, but to give him a little time, little respite, we will have Dr. Pavel Bernat, who's an expert on space terrorism. Before he starts, I must say that there are very few people, there is very few material, considering that it's a phenomenon or a field which is just about opening up. So we look forward to whatever you're going to tell us about this very interesting and a fairly new looking field. Over to you, Dr. Bernat.
Thank you very much. Let me start with thanking you for inviting me. It's a very interesting conference, so I do enjoy it a lot. So thank you for having me. I'll try to show you my presentation and hope it works. I haven't used Google Meet. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it, Dr. Bernat.
Okay, excellent. So my name is Pavel Bernat. I teach at the Polish Air Force University. I'm a senior lecturer, and for 6 years now, I've been working on safety and security of outer space, and space terrorism is one of the fields of my expertise. As you have mentioned, okay. This is a relatively new field of study, although the phenomenon is not that new. So like we can trace it back actually to the 1980s, but it relatively wasn't that significant from the perspective of national or international security. But now what I will try to, what I will argue actually for today is that this phenomenon is growing in significance. So the topic of my presentation today is Decoding Space Terrorism, which is, by the way, the title doesn't come from me, but I think it is excellent. So I added a subtitle, Conceptualization and Threat Analysis. So this is my quick agenda, what I'm gonna talk about today. So like, I really wanted to start with trying to, or like presenting you a few definitions. There haven't been many so far, and I'm actually working right now on a better definition, I guess, because like 3 years back, I came up with a definition of space terrorism. But as you can imagine, the evolution has been quite quick lately. And then I'm going to talk briefly about, the terrorist motivation, why they would engage in space terrorism. And then I'm going to just move strictly to space. So I'm going to talk about the potential targets and how they can be targeted. So what are the potential actually, and the potential methods of attacking space sector, so to speak. Then I'm just go very briefly through case studies, and then I'll conclude with threat assessment, current and future threat assessment, although this is a qualitative threat assessment. So I'm not going to present you with some particular numeric data on that. So as I have mentioned already, this is a relatively new phenomenon. And to be honest, not so many researchers have been working on that. Obviously, national space agencies have their own documents where they try to define this issue. But on the academic side, there hasn't been much work done so far, at least. So I'm not going to read all those definitions. I'm just going to read this mine working definition that I think, obviously, because it is mine, describes the phenomenon in best terms. Although, as I said before, I'm still working on it, and I'm going to publish a paper on that. It should be published this year still. But what do we mean by space terrorism? On the margin, I'd like to say that all the previous presentations, they dealt and described different areas of terrorism, and their meaning or definitions have been really well established, because those like biological, nuclear threat and so on, or just using conventional weapons, have been there for a long time, and in a much greater scale, contrary to space terrorism. And so what do we mean by space terrorism? We could define it as a purposeful and well thought out act of destruction against human and or material resources of space industry or space sector, undertaken by individuals or groups out of ideological motivation, where space industry is understood as an economic sector dedicated to producing components that go into Earth orbits or beyond, delivering them to those regions. That means launchers, rockets, basically, and related services. And the related services, when we talk today about space terrorism, this is actually the most crucial part of it, because it is the most vulnerable. Obviously, there is no one space terrorism definition, and there will be no one definition, just like with terrorism. By the way, there are many parallels between space terrorism and aviation terrorism. In aviation terrorism, again, many agencies, national agencies, governments have their own definitions of what terrorism is, which definition should serve in the best possible way the action of those agency or government. So we should not expect one decisive space terrorism definition. What I predict actually for the future, again, drawing an analogy between space terrorism and aviation terrorism, that there will be a legal attempt to come up with international conventions, which would define or account certain acts as space terrorism. Again, no such legal framework has been established yet. Obviously, we have within the United Nations, UNOSA, which is agency responsible for space safety and security, but they have not addressed yet, at least, space terrorism in a form of a separate document. Very quickly, what would be the motivation, and what was the motivation of terrorists to target space sector? And there is no such analysis in the subject matter literature, but again, we could draw from the experience of aviation terrorism, so extensive media coverage. We can basically imagine if there, if such a act of terrorism would take place on space infrastructure, regardless whether it would be national agency like NASA or ISRO or Roscosmos. The media coverage and the symbolic way, like heaviness of this act would be massive. And as we understand terrorism, one of the main goals of terrorism, of terrorists, is to cause chaos and unrest, among the public. And again, this is space industry is relatively new and very important for the nations that have successfully engaged in it. So there's a symbolic meaning would be enormous. Obviously, huge media coverage, but contrary to aviation terrorism, the fact of it's not so easy actually to carry out such an attack against space infrastructure. It's almost impossible for traditionally weak groups like terrorist groups to attack actually space assets in the orbit, for example. But they could attack IT infrastructure, and that has been actually the area that has been attacked the most, which actually goes in line with what General Efrati has said. Terrorists have been pretty active in this area. But the discrepancy, so like the difference between the technology you have to have in order to attack, for example, a satellite in a kinetic way, is too large for terrorist groups who are, who do not have such financial or technological potential. But what they can attack is actually this IT infrastructure. Another very important point here is that space terrorism, so attack on space infrastructure, regardless whether on in the orbit or the ground infrastructure, has this potential capacity of causing massive disruption. It could be on the regional, national, but also international level. I mean, currently we use the global navigation satellite system in almost every device that we use. Obviously, we have mentioned already mobile phones, right? But we can think of, for example, aircraft navigation, right? We can imagine a situation where navigation infrastructure, aviation civil infrastructure would be disrupted. That could cause, terrible outcome in the sense of planes, crashing, for example. So this is another point why space terrorism could be attractive for terrorist groups. What do we mean when we think about space assets, or what would be the possible target of terrorists when it comes to space sector? And here, I have divided. Sorry for just. I have divided the sphere into 3 parts. So we start with space assets. I'm not gonna spend much time talking about this because, as mentioned already, currently, and this is very fortunate, the risk or the threat of space terrorism is minimal due to lack of this financial and technological potential terrorist groups. But these space assets are basically satellites or constellations of satellites. That includes navigational systems like GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, Beidou, and so on. Communication satellite systems, including space internet providers, which is the fastest growing part of the space sector nowadays, with SpaceX and Starlink's, OneWeb, British, and there are some other constellations like Cooper by Blue Origin. This is again a private American company, but also Russia, China, and I think also India. They have ideas to build such a system that basically, we have internet from other satellites from the orbit. And then we have tracking and imaging satellite systems, very crucial. For example, we can see in the current war in Ukraine how important they are. Like Ukraine's gain higher ground because they have access to this data, and surveillance, reconnaissance, and intelligence satellite system as well. So they potentially could be attacked by terrorists. What is actually more vulnerable to such an attack is ground infrastructure, and we have had already such attacks. Already, like 1984, there was an attack on ESA, European Space Agency headquarters. 6 people were injured in this attack. And when we talk about ground infrastructure, we basically mean launching pads and national agencies, including employees, but also this growing number of space companies that have been successful in space exploration and utilization, and that includes also their employees. But also, and this is very important to note, that the users are actually most vulnerable. So us, basically speaking. So like, those passengers in this example of plane, which navigation system, was hacked, for example. So we have this huge amount of globally of equipment that receives the information signal from space, for example. And the last part here, we have information technology, space sector infrastructure. And here we talk about the whole nexus, interconnected of both hardware and software, that those systems are built upon both space assets and ground infrastructure. And this is the area that has been attacked the most, because it's easier. It's basically easiest. As it was mentioned already, you don't need much. You just need skill, knowledge, and maybe a few computers and a server, and that's it. So how those targets could be attacked? I'm sorry for just, maybe I should have just put no animations. Anyhow, so when we talk about space assets, so basically satellites, we can attack it in 2 ways, like with this typology. By the way, there are a few different typologies. I don't think it is important for us, but here we have kinetic attacks, which is basically anti-satellite weapon systems. And here we can have DA, direct ascent, so basically missiles launch either from ground, from the sea, or from the air, and all those types of weapons, missiles, have been produced, or co-orbital weapons, so space. And here I'm not gonna go into like technical details, but basically we could, for example, hack a satellite to enter this collision trajectory, or China and Russia. We know that they have developed such a potential of actually tracking another satellite, and possibly physically just destroy it. And non-kinetic attacks, we could use electromagnetic, laser, and microwave weapons. Both three of them are actually at the very beginning of the development stage. Then again, that requires huge amount of financial, technological, knowledge resources. So space assets, at least for now, are pretty safe in terms of potential terrorist attack. What is not safe, which is shown by experience as well, is ground infrastructure, so space infrastructure on ground, and IT, so IT space sector infrastructure. When it comes to ground infrastructure, we can have, kinetic attacks. So just the use of conventional weapon systems. It could be a manpad, so like even those like small one-man operated launch rockets, and different kinds of sabotage. And when it comes to IT infrastructure, we can have electronic attacks and also cyber attacks. That I'm gonna talk more about this because they are basically much more relevant to our topic today. So electronic attack, we basically have two types: jamming and spoofing. And like I think I have. Sorry for that. I think it froze. Okay. So how those electronic attacks look like? So spoofing basically, what it does, it creates like a diversion for the signal. It is especially dangerous, for example, for ships. As you can see here on this slide, on this picture, spoofed, like ship, could be military, it could be civilian, can be convinced actually to follow desired trajectory, but in reality, due to spoofing signal, would go that entirely different way. And it has been actually tested, where like captains and crew in general had no idea that their signal were spoofed. Yeah, so obviously from the terrorist point of view, this is a great solution if they get such an opportunity, right? Because it can cause, again, huge damage. Jamming is a different kind of technology. Again, I'm not gonna talk.
Sorry, Dr. Bernard, about 3 more minutes.
Okay. Very, thank you very much. So I'm gonna skip that. So like when it comes to cyber, it has been talked a lot already. One thing to remember here is that the threat is real, and actually cyber attacks are the most common when it comes to space sector. Attacking a satellite or any kind of actually piece of infrastructure doesn't have to mean it's physical destruction. So here we have degree of severity. It's enough to disrupt, deny of the service this piece of infrastructure should provide. And when it comes to space terrorism, we basically so far have witnessed this the first and the second level of this degree of severity, which is the temporary partial impairment of the utility of space systems, or temporary full elimination of such a utility. And both of them do not require physical damage. And obviously, InfoWar, this is so delay or deceive. This is actually what has been done most often. Case studies. The thing is with space terrorism that we haven't had a lot of such attacks. This is the first thing. The reason for that is that space sector, when we look at it like globally, is at the very beginning of its development. So there were like traditionally not many centers that would actually pursue this endeavor. But here are just a few examples. One of the most famous ones is actually the Tamil Tigers, an attack in 2005, where they actually were able to hack one of the channels of one of the satellites and just beam their propaganda into Sri Lanka and across the Indian subcontinent. Yeah, so these are probably the most important to be mentioned here. This is a very simplified version of like the potential weapons. So when we look at this, what can be attacked by terrorists? As I have mentioned already, space asset, not so much. Current threat is minimal, okay? Because like asset systems or anti-satellite systems are actually developed by traditionally most important global actors. So it is USA, Russia, China, India, and possibly Israel also has such a potential. Ground infrastructure, again, things like that happened, but they are really well guarded. So so the current threat is also minimal. When we but when we talk about SpaceX or IT infrastructure, so electronic and cyber attacks, this is when we have already the level of moderate threat. So when you look at the number of attacks that have happened already, and when we take into account democratization of technology and actually this really low entry level when it comes to financial and technological part, this seems and is actually this area is actually the most vulnerable. I'm really sorry for taking a bit longer time, but that was my conclusion. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard. I think we can well appreciate being a new subject, which is of late only as assumed significance. You've given us an excellent exposure. Without wasting any time, we will go to request Dr. Jasim Haji to cover his part, that is artificial intelligence and countering terrorism. I must say, Dr. Haji, sorry, we're not sure that you would be coming. So, I was letting everyone eat a little bit into your time. So we'll be grateful and request you if you can confine to about 20 minutes. Over to you. Your bio in detail was covered in your absence. So you can go straight into your presentation. Thank you. You're mute, I think. Doctor, can you unmute?
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And sorry for the delay. I had this morning one of the family members went to coma, so your prayers for her. I'll start with my presentation now. So just bear with me and be with you. I'm having problems with sharing.
Yeah, I think it's come on, Doctor.
Yeah, no, I have a problem here sharing. Would you mind I just go through it and literally? Sorry, just as I said, I had just been connecting to the hospital laptop and trying to catch up, but it's having some issues with it.
CA Christian, sir, you can answer this.
So can I just go and talk about it literally?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
you mind, just the function has not been working. Hello all, good afternoon from Kingdom of Bahrain. I'm going to talk today about the artificial intelligence and how this affects the terrorism and how has it been functioning. Actually, on the occasion of the India's National Day, 2 days ago, we had functions called AI collaboration between Bahrain and India in sustainability. With His Excellency, the Ambassador, being one of the proponents of AI in Bahrain and the functions that we collaborate with India. Now, excuse me if I'm going to a little bit of high-level details of AI. Apologies to those who already understand what is AI and in depth what it is, but just in case people would like to know about it. In today's world, the AI is, in a couple of sentences, is how it mimics the human being's behavior, forecasting the predictions and taking actions. And this is the scary part of it. AI is also a function of programming itself. So a machine programming itself and learning and then revisiting itself and again becoming a function within a function. What is important today in AI, as many people may not understand, is it's not about the programming, it's not about the technology, it's all about the data. Without the data that we anticipate, the AI will not be any of use. Many organizations adopt AI for robotics, for chatting, but without giving a right consideration for the data. The data in 2026 will be reaching 19.2 zettabyte. Now, zettabyte, without Googling it, it means 21 zeros. So imagine that much of data on the big data, part of it you own and much of it you don't own, is a worry, is a lot to do, is the future of the countries, is the gold of, is the oil of the future, and countries will have the supremacy based on the data and of course the AI that goes with it. But many of us do not give a consideration to that. And what does that mean? What does it mean to keep? What does it mean to secure it? What does it mean to benefit from it? Now, the data scientists are becoming one of the most wanted jobs in the world. But moreover, what it takes to do that is an artificial intelligence, and part of it is the algorithm. Algorithm is in the heart of artificial intelligence. Now, algorithm, which was done by Sheikh Khwarizmi in Arab, who invented it, it means that it gives the function to itself to be able to adapt. For instance, in the machine learning, we have different sets of the algorithm or different types of functioning. It goes from starting from unsupervised to supervised to reinforcement to get to levels where the machine learning, it teaches itself. It learns from the communication with other parties and it gets to higher end of it. Now, what is the danger in doing so in the machine learning is the algorithms, but why? You get to a stage where you do not have control over it. But the algorithm itself is a function of a human. Now, the person who writes the algorithm, if he or she are biased, then it means a lot to it. And you cannot reverse the algorithm's functions at certain stages if you get too deep in it. You'll have to really scrap it and start right from the beginning. It's that complex. It depends, of course. Sometimes you do algorithms in 2 months and sometimes it takes 18 months, depending on the function that we work on. Many companies, such as Amazon and others, they scrapped their algorithms, their AI functions. For instance, in recruitment, the person who did it was a white male, and then they found out later on that the recruitment system of AWS was much biased to men and white. So it was discarding the woman, it was discarding the colored people. That's what happens. There are other functions as well. There are many stories, even if you hear Facebook when they created two robots speaking to each other, and then by self-learning, they created their own language where they have conversation without everybody else knowing what it is about. And of course, there will be a conspiracy between them. And that is even more dangerous than the terrorisms that you can track them, because these kind of algorithms, you cannot even track them. So the functions hand in hand created many solutions pre and post pandemics. I heard some of your speakers talking about security parts, which I will reach to. But then we have to understand what are the future applications that we are talking about that puts us in danger. Now, if you look at probably 3 or 4 main domains that we today have most of our operations and employees are probably healthcare, education, and up to a certain extent, the industries with IR 4.0 relying on that functions. And then, of course, without saying, is the banking. I'll keep the banking at the end because that's the most vulnerable part. But even the aviations nowadays is vulnerable with self-driving cars, self-driving drones, but Boeing's had plans in future to have self-driving aircrafts. Now, these aircrafts connected to the ground through the internet. Of course, the cockpit internet connection and passengers' internet connections are separate. They are very much isolated. But somebody, for instance, a few years ago, has proven that they can penetrate the cockpit through the passenger's internet connection. And if they do that, it means taking over the aircraft. That's probably one of the scariest parts of self-driving cars or aircrafts. Of course, the cars, you can also do the same things when they are connected through Internet of Things, IoT, to the nearest edge computers, which is going to replace the cloud computing. And if you do that, then you're able to take over the cars and act on the parts that you want, because you can take over any self-driving cars without historical data on that car or the owner of that car that's not there. So these are some of the threats. I mean, we've seen people already hacking a fridge, an autonomous fridge that is connected to the internet. And people laugh about it, but that's a small part of it. But what about the other parts that are movable that you can hack and penetrate? And the banking, the future of the banking is new banks. New banks are NEO banks. They are not new as a new. But what it means that those banks will be in future without any employees. The entire function is done without branches, without boundaries. And the entire, of course, processing will be relying on machine learning and the data that is available, whether it's for the customer and consumers transactions, or if it comes to the behavior of the customers and predicting how to handle them, up to the investment. And the investment is an important part of it because it gives you the leeway how to do it, and the fraud management. Today, fraud management in banking, the statistics says about 4 to 6 months it takes for fraud management teams to really justify or find out that that fraud is genuine and not. And by that time, most of the reports says 80% of them found out to be really genuine, not frauds. Whereas the AI fraud management can take from anything 2 to 3 minutes to find out, because by the time the human can find out the functionalities and the fraud that happens, that gives them a lot of leeway people to get out of it. The same things in the healthcare with robotic surgeries, with remote interactions. We're going to see future reliance of the radiologist or the surgeon on the artificial intelligence, and the future of education also. We will see more and more on virtual teachers instead of teachers. So you will see one-on-one for the trainings between a virtual teacher and a child who will grow from the childhood, from the kindergarten until the university with one virtual teacher, which has all the data related to that child in terms of strength, weaknesses, the family, and lessons taken in the past. So these are the dimensions that AI is going to take over. So that means more reliant on that. Now, how that is important in terms of security and terrorism. Until now, most of the cybersecurity, and I'm sure most of you, yes, when they talk about it, are related to functions, to the tools that is put on place, whether it's IDS, IPS, intrusion prevention systems, or it's the firewalls, or any other tools that you put in place. But those are not stopping hackers or criminals to go beyond them. And the function of monitoring them and conducting internal or external testing is still done by human. We have seen in the past few years that there are many hacking of the security systems, even in the countries, in the federal level, has happened without knowing who are the real criminals beyond them. And that's proven to be because of one reason, and that's because they are using artificial intelligence to conduct those attacks. And why artificial intelligence? Because it can replicate and it can function much faster than the human being in terms of monitoring the patterns and the behavior of your network, of the IP addresses and the traffic, so it can identify when the attack should happen and how it had happened. And imagine the monitoring that it happens through the machine learning and the capabilities and the processes 24/7 throughout the year with the human being, where they have an operational control center of the security trying to monitor and get alerts and react to it. But of course, there is no match between the two. So now the new criminals are building self-learning artificial intelligence that can develop itself time and time and monitor what are the latest patches and work against them and do the attacks. So why is that now important? Because we should shift our defense from human being trying to analyze all these attacks that may or may not have happened by the AI, which certainly in the near future, more of those attackers will work on that, because these are not normal people. These are the scientists who are coming from organizations for different motives to perform those attacks. Now, putting a human against that, there are no chances in future to be able to defend. So that's why we are perpetuating that in our networks defense. We should look at artificial intelligence to anticipate, forecast any attacks upcoming, whether it's through the monitoring or through looking and at the unbehavior or unusual behaviors of the network. So that's the point that I'm trying to make today, that using AI, it can be on both sides of it, from the offense to the defense. And that can be replicated to many areas, whether it's the gentleman before me mentioned the attacks on space, or on other functions that's related to banking or federal agencies or the government. Saying all that, the ethical part of the AI is very important. So AI has two parts of the security. One is securing the network for others, but the other part is securing itself. As I said earlier, it can program itself and it can develop itself how to secure itself. And as it sees the attacks, it reprograms itself through the algorithms, through advancement of them, to be able to stop that functions continuously, and which means a lot of it that human will have less interventions and less supervisory role to an autonomous role that's given to the AI through whether it's the network of the banking, health sector, or education, or the autonomous, whether it's autonomous planes, drones, cars, etc., which we are moving towards that direction anyway. And the ethical issues is very important, and there are many ethical organizations around Europe and US, but we in Asia and Middle East are lacking those because 192 of them are majority located in other places. So we'll have to mold them into our threats, functions, and external behaviors that comes. That was conclusion of my short presentation. Sorry about the hiccup that happened earlier, but it's about AI and how it can work again constantly.
Dr. Haji, thank you very much for, despite all your engagements, still finding time and joining us. It was an excellent overview, and I think in a way it was appropriate that you spoke last, because I think AI has come to assume a position where it encompasses everything else which can be done through AI, whether it is cyber terrorism or space. Everything is done using algorithms and AI, and AI actually empowers or adds synergy to everything. I think because we are short of time, and there is a session which is to follow within about 2-3 minutes, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to pick any questions, because it'll be difficult to choose which one. What would you like to do, Argesh, before I thank the
So
panelists?
I think we are running out of time. So
all right, okay,
so
no problem at all. So I would, without getting into the subject, to do any summing up, I think we've had an excellent exposure, whether it be in Cbrn aspect, or the cyber terrorism, or the space terrorism, or in artificial intelligence in terrorism. Due to time constraint, it is understandable that you couldn't get in so much into the terrorism part of it, but I think the manner in which it was covered by all the panelists, and the way they dissected it and exposed, explained the manner in which it is used, and the ease with which one can lay one's hands on it, and the way information, material, knowledge, technology, everything has been democratized, and the ease with which it can be accessed by terrorists sitting anywhere. And I really liked the aspect which I think Dr. Bernard said, or was it Dr. Rami said, probably. The same resolve that was shown in restricting and living with even curtailed privacy during COVID. That's the kind of resolve that is required to fight terrorism, because it cannot be done by any particular force, only the government or anyone. There is a requirement for everyone, whether it is as individuals, as the civil society, to come together, hold hands, to be vigilant, to monitor, and then only we will be able to counter the new age terrorism, which has so much possibility to put into use the capability that technology gives them. Thank you very much. So Colonel Dr. Ramatable, Brigadier General Rami, Dr. Bernard, and Dr. Haji, thank you all. Thank you very much for sparing your time and joining us, and giving us your thoughts. And Indic Researchers Forum, once again, on behalf of all the panelists, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.